Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the virtual public meeting for the Town of Oakville Stormwater Fee Feasibility Study. Thank you so much for taking the time to participate. Today is really an opportunity to learn about the study and for the project team to answer any questions that you may have. My name is Catherine Ross, and I'm a facilitator with ACOM, and I'll be your moderator. We'll start with a land acknowledgement. Oakville, as we know it today, is rich in the history and modern traditions of many First Nations. From the lands of the Anishinaabe to the Attawandaron and Haudenosaunee, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in First Nations history. As we gather today on the sacred lands of the Treaties 14 and 22, we are in solidarity with Indigenous brothers and sisters to honor and respect Mother Earth, the original nations of the trees and plants, the four-legged, the flyers, the finned, and the crawlers as the original stewards of Mother Earth. We acknowledge and give gratitude to the waters as being life and being sacred, and to the carriers of those water teachings, the females. We acknowledge and give gratitude for the wisdom of the grandfathers and the four winds that carry the spirits of our ancestors that walked this land before us. The town of Oakville is located on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the treaty holders, for being stewards of this traditional territory. Before we get started, I'd like to run through a few housekeeping items, and then we'll get into the agenda. So tonight we're using Zoom's webinar platform, and in this platform, all attendees are muted and you won't have access to your video. That means that we invite your participation through the Q&A box. You can find this feature through the menu bar by hovering your mouse over the screen. If you're using a smartphone or a tablet, you can just tap the screen. No other attendees will be able to see the questions, and there's also an option to submit the questions anonymously. We do know that technological problems can and do happen, so we appreciate your patience with us. If you do have any issues, feel free to use the Q&A box as well. We'll monitor it throughout the meeting and do our best to help you. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded. All of the Q&A will remain anonymous in the recording to avoid any privacy concerns. So now our agenda. As I mentioned, the purpose of the meeting today is to discuss the stormwater fee feasibility study and answer your questions. Our presentation will include opening remarks and introductions, an overview of stormwater and stormwater management, a reintroduction of the stormwater fee feasibility study, a summary of what we've heard during past consultation, an overview of the preferred fee structure, and information about incentive programs. So following the presentation, the team will also address your questions. Feel free to ask them throughout the meeting, but we will hold off on responding to them until the presentation is done. And we do have about 90 minutes scheduled today. So I'll invite each speaker to come on video and say hello with your introduction. And from the town of Oakville, we'll start with Catherine Hewitson, Director of Asset Management.
Good evening.
Thank you, Catherine. And we have Danielle Tuman, Manager of Revenue Services and Taxation.
Good evening, everyone.
And Phoebe Fu, Community Infrastructure Commissioner. Okay, and the town has also engaged ACOM to help complete the study. From ACOM, we have Pippi Warburton, the project manager.
Good evening.
Thank you. And I'll turn it over to Catherine for opening remarks.
Good evening, everyone. In 2023, staff began work on a town-wide rainwater management plan to develop a long-term stormwater infrastructure program that takes a comprehensive look at our stormwater needs to not only maintain our assets in state of good repair, but also provide enhancements to build resiliency against climate change. This work has provided us with an understanding of our future stormwater infrastructure needs and identified that we need approximately $732 million over the next 30 years, which averages to about $24.4 million per year. This will help continue to effectively manage our stormwater and protect town residents and property owners from the extreme rainfall events. Having a financial plan to support our infrastructure needs is a requirement of the Asset Management Regulation 588-17. And as a result, over the past year or so, the town has been exploring options for a sustainable funding source to support this long-term stormwater management program. Many municipalities are moving toward a new financing approach for stormwater that shifts the costs away from the property tax system to a user-pay system similar to water and wastewater rates. So under this user fee model, property owners that have more hard surfaces and contribute more runoff to the town stormwater system would pay more. Next slide, please. Effective public and stakeholder engagement is critical to the success of the development of this long-term stormwater management plan. The plan includes 3 rounds of engagement and consultation, which has been coordinated to support council's decision-making process. Round 1 started back in June 2024, focusing on providing the public background on the town's vast stormwater system and services, the importance of stormwater management and why we need to increase our investment for stormwater infrastructure. This was followed by 2 council workshops that were held to provide more information from staff and outside experts regarding Southern Ontario's changing climate and infrastructure solutions, the town's stormwater infrastructure needs, the outline of the stormwater fee feasibility study approach, and the funding options being considered and why. This was then followed by an extensive public communication engagement period that included a town-wide survey, 2 public information sessions, a virtual business information session, as well as consultation with the chamber and its members. In December 2024, staff provided council a report that outlined the results of the round 2 public engagement and presented the evaluation of 3 funding models. Today, we're here to provide an overview of the recommended stormwater funding structure, the proposed fees, and incentive program.
Thanks, Catherine, and we'll pass it over to Pippi for the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here tonight and present this to you. We'll go to the next slide and I'll start this recap. So as Catherine was saying, we've got a bit of a recap on stormwater and stormwater runoff. So stormwater is really anything that comes from rain or melted snow that falls and runs over the land into the stormwater drains, the ditches, the sewers, the creeks, the lakes. And like Catherine was saying, that the most important thing is it's not drinking water and it's not wastewater. Those are funded very differently, so it's important to make that differentiation. We're going to talk a lot about infiltration, and I think most people understand what infiltration is. It's the process where the water soaks into the soil, into the natural landscapes, and allows for infiltration, whereas the hard surfaces are built landscapes that do not. Impervious areas are the surfaces that don't allow the water to penetrate the ground, so driveways, roofs, things like that. Increased runoff means more flows are going to the system, and severe cases of increased runoff during peak storm events can lead to flooding. Regular increased runoff leads to more erosion and that type of thing. So all of these things impact the need for stormwater management system. Next slide. So what happens when stormwater is not managed correctly? It often hits the news, and that's when we really think about stormwater. So we have erosion in our creeks and our ditches and channels, or on the shores of the lake shores. You get debris in the channel that needs to be monitored and cleaned out so they can flow properly. You can get pollutants. Even just sediment is considered a pollutant, so that's suspended solids that's in the water, but we also have other types of chemical pollutants and other types of pollutants we see in our creeks and lakes. Probably the most common one that we're familiar with is road flooding, and the roads are designed to convey the major flows, but they are designed to convey the major flows and then drain away quickly. Anything in excess of the storm sewers is supposed to be conveyed by the road system and conveyed to the outlets that way. Sometimes you get infrastructure failures, and if you get a culvert that fails catastrophically, it can cause a road to close, and perhaps some of you have seen something like that. So it's very important that infrastructure gets monitored and visited regularly and gets maintained and updated regularly too. Next slide. So some people are surprised to know how much infrastructure is in your town. So the Oakville Stormwater system is nearly 1,000 kilometers of ditches and storm sewers, and that's the distance from Oakville to Quebec City. You also have over 150 kilometers of creeks. You've got 8 kilometers of shorelines, over 30,000 catch basins, and 67 stormwater management ponds. So that's a lot of infrastructure that the town staff is responsible for maintaining and overseeing on your behalf. The total value based on assessed values and benchmarked values for this type of infrastructure is $963 million. So that includes some of your the natural assets that there are not included. So your creeks and lake shores, and some of those are not included. Next slide. So the town has done quite a lot of work over the last few years, coming up with the needs assessment through asset management planning, your rainwater management plan, and they've looked at the stormwater needs, also based on benchmarked information through the industry that other municipalities across Canada are spending to maintain their infrastructure properly, and good asset management planning. So one part of that is the ongoing life cycle needs, the operating capital renewal costs. That's to protect the existing infrastructure and natural assets, to maintain the stormwater functionality, and it's based on physical condition inspections and condition assessments. That amount is about $350 million in total for the next 30 years. And then to adjust to climate change, to make sure that projects are identified to adapt and improve the stormwater network and provide an increased level of stormwater protection. And this is all based on studies and stormwater modeling for more extensive extreme weather events. And it's very much in line with other municipalities across the country are doing. And that's been priced at approximately $365 million. So this number of $24 million per year on average is an approximate value that the town feels they need for the ongoing maintenance and operations of their stormwater system. Okay, next slide. So it's probably good to spend a little more time just to emphasize the amount of work that it takes to maintain the stormwater system that the town maintains on your behalf. So capital programs include repair and renewal of storm sewers and minor culverts, monitoring and rehabilitating creek channels and the lakeshore to control erosion, cleaning out sediment ponds. They're designed to trap sediment, but that sediment needs to be cleaned out regularly to make sure they stay functional. Maintaining your low impact development things like bioswales, natural channels, tree and irrigation pits. Renew the ditches, clean out the ditches, improve drainage through the southern Oakville neighborhoods, and improve Oakville and Bronte Harbor shorelines as well. Next slide. Other stormwater services the town provides is asset management planning, which is now legislated by the Ontario government. And part of that legislation indicates that you have to have a sustainable funding source for all of your assets as well. Assessments, flood risk assessments and studies of condition assessments and audits, infrastructure inspections and cleaning and repairing, infrastructure renewals and upgrades, climate resiliency improvements, emergency responses to breakage, spills and flooding, and monitoring water quality and flow and erosion as well. Okay, now we're going to go and talk next a little bit about how stormwater is funded. Next slide. So currently, the town of Oakville funds their stormwater program through the existing taxes that they collect. Currently, on average, the tax collected by the city, 4% of that total tax goes towards the stormwater management program. And if we look at that pie chart, we can see the yellow part is the residential properties, the blue part is the non-residential properties. So currently, residential properties fund over 80% of the taxes collected in the town. Next slide. By comparison, we look at where the stormwater is actually coming from. And if you think back to what Catherine was saying about how we fund drinking water and wastewater, those are funded through rates that are proportional to measured amounts that are measured by your meters in your homes. Since we can't do that with stormwater, we use a proxy by looking at the property area and then the type of property it is. So with this calculation, residential properties represent about 57% of the total stormwater runoff in the town of Oakville, whereas non-residential properties represent 43% of the total runoff. Runoff's estimated using runoff can be used to estimate the impact on the town's stormwater management system, and the stormwater management costs could be better distributed if they were based more proportionally to the amount of stormwater runoff coming from the properties. Next slide. So how we got here, the town decided to pursue the stormwater feasibility study, the stormwater fee feasibility study, and consider new ways to pay for stormwater. These were some of the things that they thought about, that the current tax system is not really fair and equitable because it's not proportional to the amount of runoff coming from a property. It's based on the assessed value of the property. There's a need for sustainable funding, and as I mentioned, that's now regulated through the Ontario Government Regulation 588/17 that requires asset management plans for all of the assets in the municipality and also a sustainable funding mechanism to support them. The stormwater fee model shifts the method to pay per use system, and the stormwater fees are more transparent. Next slide. So through the process of this study and the feasibility study in the early stages and with input from the public, we came up with some guiding principles for selecting a funding method. These guiding principles were whether it was fair and equitable, whether it was affordable and financially sustainable, whether it was justifiable, climate change, it provided climate change resiliency, and whether it was simple to understand and manage. Next slide. So throughout this process, we've had to find a balance. The existing tax method, although it's easy to administer, so it has a low administrative cost, it's also low when we look at fair and whether it's fair and equitable. A tiered flat fee would provide better fair and equitability, but it's slightly more cumbersome to administer. Whereas a variable fee based on property area and land use would be more difficult to administer, but it provides better fairness and equitability. So the three options that we've been discussing throughout this study were option 1, the existing tax system, option 2, a tiered flat stormwater fee, and option 3, a variable stormwater fee based on stormwater runoff. The existing tax system could create a new levy that would be specific to stormwater. However, the properties would still be paying based on their assessed value. Option 2 would be a tiered flat stormwater fee. So this was where all the properties would be divided into 3 tiers, and all the properties in the same tier would pay the same fee. So this might be reasonably fair for, say, residential properties where there's not a huge difference between them, and the fee difference might only be, $10 or $15 a month or something, or a year. It might not be very equitable for the larger industrial areas where there would be great disparity. So option 3, the variable stormwater fee based on stormwater runoff would address this more equitably. These fees would be based on the estimated stormwater runoff for each individual property. The property owners would be pay based on the measured runoff area for each property. And that's calculated by using the property size and the property type. Next slide. So we've done quite a lot of consultation through this process, and I'm just going to go through a little bit of what we've heard back. Next slide. So the key objectives for the fall 2024 engagement were to understand community values regarding stormwater management and the town's funding needs, and to get feedback on the shortlisted funding options, and to get feedback and inform the possible financial incentives program. Next slide. During this fall engagement, 2 surveys, residential and non-residential, were posted on the study website. Surveys were promoted on the town's social media and at 2 public information sessions. Surveys were available from September 16th to October 18th, 2024, and hard copies were made available at the in-person meeting that was hosted on October 2nd last year. We received a total of 741 individual responses to at least one of the two surveys. Next slide. So some of the feedback is summarized here that we received. 87% of residential respondents consider stormwater management as either very important or important. 81% of respondents believe that it's important to implement stormwater improvements for climate resiliency. And 72% of respondents also consider it important or very important that the town has a sustainable funding source for stormwater management needs. Regarding stormwater management and fairness, most respondents believe that with more properties with more hard surfaces should contribute more to the town's stormwater budget, and that costs should be distributed according to the amount of stormwater generated. When asked, do you think the properties with more hard surfaces should be paying more towards stormwater management costs? You can see on the left that 57% said yes. Interestingly, when we said should the stormwater management costs be distributed across the community in a way that's proportional to the amount of runoff generated by properties, we can see here 33% yes and 34% agreed. 33% strongly agreed and 34% agreed. Next slide. So in summary, the preference for the fee type, when we asked how residential properties should pay for stormwater runoff, the answer was a variable fee based on stormwater runoff, with 408 respondents ranking this first. For non-residential properties, the same, a variable fee based on stormwater runoff, with 526 respondents ranking this option first. We next asked about incentive programs. How important was it for incentive programs for the town to offer incentive programs to encourage property owners to implement on-site controls on their sites? You can see on the left here, 42% said very important and 28% said important. If the town was to offer a subsidy or rebate program, we asked how likely would people be to apply for it. Here we got 33% saying very likely and 36% saying likely. So we'll move to our recommendations, which we're presenting here tonight. Next slide. So based on our guiding principles and looking at these three options, we evaluated the three options. We evaluated the three options based on our guiding principles. The variable method best aligns with the guiding principles, but requires the most administrative effort. The tiered flat fee could also be considered as simple to administer after a one-time setup. Variable versus flat fees. For non-residential properties, a flat fee of $2,900 is not considered equitable for small businesses versus $65 on a variable fee. So there's a large discrepancy in sizes of non-residential properties. So if we went with a flat fee, which would be an average of all of those properties, the smaller properties would be paying way too much. The larger properties would not be paying enough. The average larger property should pay $12,500 as opposed to a flat fee of just $2,900. Only 3% of the properties are non-residential, and therefore the cost to administer the variable fee is quite low for the non-residential properties. For the residential properties, the average semi-linked home is half the size of the average single detached home. And this results in about a $100 difference annually. 10% of the single detached homes are greater than 1,000 square meters and would pay more than $900 per year with a variable fee, and some as high as $30,000. The total of 62,000 residential properties would need manual property sizing calculations for each property, and therefore that would be a high administrative cost. Next slide. So based on public feedback and on some technical evaluation, the following fee structure is recommended. Stormwater costs are distributed to property groups, non-residential and residential, based on estimated runoff area. Properties within those groups will be responsible for paying their group's runoff area. A variable fee based on property area for non-residential properties, and a rate per square meter is calculated based on the runoff area. which is calculated using the property type's coefficient, runoff coefficient, and the property size. Non-residential properties can apply for a credit for on-site stormwater management practices. And a three-tiered flat structure for residential properties, and the three tiers would be the high-density residential properties, which would be condominiums, townhouses, apartments, and the medium-density residential, which is semi-detached and link homes, and then the low-density residential properties, which would be single-detached homes. So what are runoff coefficients? Runoff coefficients, it's a maximum of 1, and it assumes that all stormwater becomes runoff, with the minimum 0 assuming that no stormwater is runoff or absorbed on the property. The runoff coefficients is then multiplied by the property area to give you the runoff area. For example, if a property is 1,000 square meters and it's a commercial business, the runoff coefficient for a commercial business is 0.9. So property area times runoff coefficient is the runoff area, which would be 900 square meters. So these are our recommended stormwater fees. These are annual fees. So the low density residential properties would annually pay $273 per year. Medium density residential properties, $128 per year, and high density residential properties, $60 per year. Institutional non-residential properties, so institutional and mixed properties, would pay $42 per 100 square meters of area. Commercial would be $51 per 100 square meters, and special areas that are considered golf courses, vacant development lands would pay $6 per 100 square meters of area. So when we look at how these fees compare to the property tax method, so this is where we were hoping to see that this fee is showing better equity than the current system, the tax method. So here's some examples. Condominiums and townhouses. Through the property tax method, the townhouses would pay about $186 through their taxes for stormwater management in the city. And a condo on average is about $130. With a stormwater fee, this would be $60 annually. So you're going to see them coming down. A single detached home currently pays through their taxes for stormwater in the town of Oakville about $320 towards the stormwater program per year. Through the stormwater fee, it would go down just a little bit to $273 per year. And a semi-detached home is currently paying $186, would go down to $128 through our stormwater fee program. And this is all based on the sustainable funding level of $24 million per year that the town requires. Next. So now we look at where the big differences really come into play, and this is for the non-residential properties. So if we look at the smaller business at 200 square feet, this property on the far left, currently through taxes, they're contributing about $210. Through the stormwater fee, they'd be paying $98, but they would be eligible for a credit and could end up paying as low as $59 per year. When we come to a larger property of 8,100 square meters, we see that they're currently paying approximately $1,900 through taxes towards the stormwater program in the town. With the stormwater fee, they would be charged $4,100. Again, they'd be able to apply for a credit, which could reduce their fee to $2,450 per year. When we look at this much larger property, it's 72,900 square meters, all paved. Currently, they're paying $27,400 through their property taxes for stormwater. With a stormwater fee program, they'd be paying $36,970. Again, they could apply for a credit to reduce their fee to just over $22,000 per year. Next. So we have to consider that some properties might be exempt from paying a fee. So some properties are tax and fee exempt under certain legislations. Some properties provide a service that's beneficial to the community that's not provided by the municipality. New fees may be unaffordable for nonprofit or charitable organizations. Also, that vacant land and green space type properties and not under the non-residential classification. Should they pay the same as the commercial industrial tiers? Most of them have some hard services and do generate stormwater runoff. And should the town and the region pay for the properties that they own? Next. Certain properties do not currently pay for stormwater management through property tax. Those properties will continue to be exempt. These properties include federal and provincial properties, including public schools and hospitals, non-school board-based education institutions like Sheridan College, places of worship, cemeteries, charities, and hydro properties. Next slide. So after exemptions were considered, we then looked at incentive programs in more detail. So like many municipalities across the country who have stormwater fees implemented, they've included incentive programs that incentivizes property owners to reduce the impact of stormwater by offering credits. Credits are an ongoing stormwater fee reduction, whereas rebates are a one-time reward for implementing an on-site measure. Stormwater fee credit programs allow for stormwater fee reductions for landowners who implement on-site stormwater management practices. They provide credits for facilities that provide flooding and erosion protection, water quality treatment, and other environmental benefits for non-facility measures and activities that promote good housekeeping practices. These credits would require some certification that the facilities have been properly designed and installed and operated and maintained, and some would require access to allow for inspection occasionally by municipal staff. Property owners who reduce stormwater runoff and improve water quality of the stormwater system that discharges from their property to the surrounding water bodies and water courses would qualify for stormwater credits. The financial incentive program for residential properties. For this, we've decided to go with rebate programs. There's existing rebate programs that are offered by Halton Region and Conservation Halton. A credit program for residential properties is not recommended due to properties that have low monthly fees anyway, and large number of properties which would create a large administrative burden to inspect and consider all of these properties. For the non-residential properties, the fees are much greater and there's a much larger disparity between the property sizes. So having a stormwater incentive program for these properties makes more sense because there's much fewer of them and therefore much less of an administrative burden, and you get much more benefit from providing stormwater management on these types of properties. So the credit program the town has decided on for the non-residential properties takes three main components. So if you slow the water down, so peak flow reduction, it means holding the water on the property so it doesn't run off the property too quickly. This could be something like detention ponds and tanks. If you meet the development requirements for these, you'd get up to 25% credit. If you go above and beyond what's required, you could get up to 35% credit for these types of facilities. The next category we call clean it up, and that's based on water quality. So removing pollutants and sediment from the stormwater runoff. These could be things like catch basin shields, oil grit separators, or other treatment facilities. If you meet the current requirements, which is 80% total suspended solid removal, you could get up to 10% credit. And if you go above and beyond, up to 15% credit would be available. And then there's the soak it up. That's the volume reduction. And that's providing some infiltration on your property. So green spaces, bioswales, rain gardens, reuse facilities, those types of things. Those all absorb the rainfall into the ground before it runs off the property. So again, meeting requirements, which is about 25 millimeters first rainfall capture, is 25% reduction, up to a 25% reduction. And going above and beyond, you could receive up to a 35% reduction. The total maximum credit would be 40% for meeting requirements and up to 50% for going above and beyond. Okay, next slide. How the credit program works. Stormwater management structures must be owned, maintained, and operated by the property owner. Structures that have been assumed by the town would not be eligible. So any kind of regional stormwater facilities would not be eligible. The property owner must apply to the town with the required documentation to obtain the credit, and proof that the installation meets requirements will be required for an eligible credit. The credit application would need to be renewed every 2 to 5 years. Property owners must provide proof of proper maintenance also to the facilities, and existing stormwater features may also be eligible. Next. The town plans to phase in this fee over the next 3 years. The recommended implementation fan over the next 3 years will gradually increase to the full 24 million a year funding requirement. This will allow businesses time to plan for costs and explore options in the credit program. Slide.
Okay,
So
thank you.
Oops, sorry.
Thanks for yeah, no worries. So I'll just share about next steps. If you are a non-residential property owner and you'd like to meet with the study team, please reach out directly and we can provide an early stormwater fee estimate. In 2025 of September, a final report will go to council, and if the report is approved, implementation will start in 2026. You can stay in touch with the team and reach out with any questions, comments, or concerns. Our email address is stormwaterfee@oakville.ca. And before we get to the Q&A, our next slide just talks about the information that we wanted to highlight from our website on oakville.ca. We have background information on the stormwater system in the town of Oakville and infrastructure needs. We also have 3 videos that are shareable. The first one is on what is stormwater and why is it important. The second is on how the town manages stormwater and why we need more funding. And the third explains why the town is exploring different funding options. We also have links to council workshops and reports, public meeting materials, key dates, and who to contact for questions. So you just go to oakville.ca and type in stormwater fee, and the webpage will appear in the search results. So we will move to the Q&A, and we do have some questions coming in. So thanks for your patience. Again, if you have any questions to add, you put them in the Q&A box. If we do run out of time to answer your question and it wasn't addressed, please send it to the project team at the study's email address. It's stormwaterfee@oakville.ca. So we will start with our first question about concrete and impervious areas. This person has noted that many Oakville residents are putting in poured concrete driveways, front walks, patios, and may be unaware that poured concrete driveways and paths increase the load on neighboring houses so that they can absorb excess rainwater. Does the town of Oakville have a communication plan to inform taxpayers of the drawbacks of poured concrete and maybe more generally of impervious areas?
Do you want me to answer that, or I can?
Sure, if you want to take a first run and then we'll see if anyone from the town would like to add to it.
Yeah. Well, as a water resources engineer, I can definitely agree with you there that I think that's terrible. We should be going the opposite direction, really. So it does require an education campaign and encouragement and certainly incentivizing these types of things on the industrial and commercial properties. We'll really see some movement there, I hope. But for the residential properties, yeah, it's an education campaign that's required. And, you know, we see a lot of that sort of happen perennially. So hopefully we'll see more of it.
We do have a couple more topics on questions on the same topic. So is there a methodology to determine the permeability for each property? If a residential property has a fully concrete backyard due to a pool and patio, will they pay more since they have more hardscape and produce more runoff?
Yeah, so not through the the fee structure that we've chosen. And the reason for that is because calculating the exact runoff area for all of the residential properties would be too burdensome, and it would just cost too much considering the benefit that we would get. Because the properties are small, the fees are small. So even if we calculated that your neighbor, it's all paved, and yours, which was more grassed, the fee differential just wouldn't warrant the administrative cost of doing this for all the residential properties in the town. But it makes more sense for the commercial industrial properties. So, but there is a way to do it, and it can be done. There are a few municipalities that have chosen to go that route and calculate the runoff area for every single residential properties. And it's something that the town might consider in future iterations of the stormwater fee. But in this one, they've decided to use an approximation and an average for residential properties.
Okay, thanks, Vivian. I think that answers another similar question we had about whether there could be more of a breakdown in the low density residential properties, a smaller house on a larger property versus a larger home on a very small property. Anything else that you want to add to that?
Yeah, just again that, we could broken down into more tiers and made it, the more tiers you break it down into, obviously the more equitable and fair it is. But there's that balance between the administrative burden and labor of calculating all of those fees. So we talked a lot about that throughout the study, and it definitely came up in our consultation, a lot. And so instead of just having one lump sum for all residential properties, we chose to divide it into three, and felt that was a good enough approximation, and provide some equity, but still not being too laborious to calculate.
Okay, thanks, Pippi. There is a question about whether the slides from today's presentation will be available online, and both the recording and the slides will be posted online shortly after the presentation is done. Okay, we have some questions about taxes. So if there are changes based off of this study, what happens to the 4% that is currently contributing to stormwater? Catherine, would you like? Go ahead.
Sure. With the implementation of the stormwater fee, all of the 732 million that we've estimated we need for stormwater services, as well as our ongoing capital renewal program, would be funded from the fee itself. So we would not be using property taxes to cover any of the stormwater costs anymore. So essentially, yes, those costs would come off the property tax base. But I believe everyone well knows that the property taxes fund a number of different services. It funds your libraries, your fire, recreation, community centers and programs, transit, parks and open spaces, to name a few. So there's a lot of other pressures and funding requirements for the property taxes. So even though we take the stormwater off, in an ideal world, the property taxes would go down, but the reality is there's probably other needs across the town that might be added.
Okay, thank you for that. And just on the topic of taxes and budgeting more generally, there's just some concern was noted about the survey sample size. And could you share more information about how budget-related decisions are made?
So all of our budget decisions are made by council, which is done in a public forum. So the public is welcome to come to council and delegate and share their thoughts and ideas and considerations. They also are welcome to meet with their board counselor and have a conversation. I know they're always open and willing to have that conversation. So those are ways that we encourage residents to share their thoughts and ideas. regarding budget and other funding matters.
Thank you. Okay, we have a couple of different topics coming up in terms of shoreline protection that was mentioned in the beginning of the presentation. Was that referring to public shoreline, or is the town paying for protection of private properties on the shoreline?
Currently, the 732 million looks at the publicly owned shoreline as well as the shoreline within the harbor areas, and not the privately owned shoreline area.
Okay, and Pippi, is there anything that you want to expand on, how protection of the shoreline works with folks who live along the shoreline and, the importance of stormwater management along the lake as well?
Yeah, no, we talk about natural water courses and lakes a lot, especially for properties that directly outlet to them. And all municipalities are responsible for their outlets that their stormwater is conveyed to as well, making sure they're maintained properly. So, not just erosion, but also water quality as well. So those require, those kind of studies and constant vigilance as well. So, and lots of very expensive work when they do fail. So it's very much a case of a stitch in time saves nine. So making sure that you're inspecting them regularly and doing good asset management planning and budgeting for maintenance and upgrade of any of the facilities down at the waterfront, like walls and retaining structures and the outlet structures themselves.
Okay, thank you. We do have a question, if there's an opportunity to share more about the phased in approach over the couple of years.
Yeah, so we know this is a bit of a shift to the taxpayers and trying to understand what the difference between the fee and the property taxes are. So we've proposed that we phase in the fee over a 3-year period. So for the low density residential property, as an example, in year 1, if approved, starting in 2026, the fee would be $137. And then in the following year, it would increase to 188. And then the third year, 273, which would be our $24 million funding target. This is an example for a commercial property. So their fees would be phased in as well at approximately maybe $18,000 that's all based on the area of a property though. This example would be $18,000 and then year 2, 25,000 and then year 3, 36,000. And that would be before any credit program. So the other amounts reflect what a maximum credit of 40% would be.
Okay, thank you. We have a question about professional engineers in relation to the rebate credit program, so the incentives for non-residential properties. Will a report have to be prepared by a professional engineer registered in Ontario, related to engineering consulting fees and work needed to develop these reports to the city? It's a little specific, but do we have any details on whether that is necessary?
We have not developed I'll say the implementation details related to the credit program yet. So it'll be difficult for us to answer that question right now. So stay tuned to once we get the credit program approved, we will then start developing all the criterias and the requirements. And there'll be guidelines and tips related to what's required at that time.
Okay, thank you. And Pippi, just a clarification on the math here. Oh, sorry, before we move on, Pippi, do you want to jump in on what's typically done for related to reports and incentive programs and any requirements, maybe what other municipalities are doing?
Yeah. Yeah, professional engineers in Ontario tend to sign and actually seal calculation documents. So these are recommendations. So we make recommendations to the towns and municipalities, and then their own staff and engineers would choose to adopt them mostly. So I haven't seen one of these studies that's sealed and stamped by an engineer. So there's a sort of a very clear guidelines of what we stamp and what we don't, but we do sign the documents and all of our reports are signed. And like I said, I'm a professional engineer and I believe so is Phoebe. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. And if we could go back to the slide, there's a clarifying question on the fee for a semi-detached residential property. So just a clarifying question, confirming if the proposed fee for semi-detached residential is less than half of a detached property. And the comment is saying there may be typically more hardscape with 2 semi-detached properties, like 2 driveways.
Yeah, yeah, I see what you mean. It does look like, more of the property is hardscaped, but there tend to be smaller properties. So when you multiply the runoff coefficient by the area, that's the calculation we're doing. But you're right, because you've got 2 driveways there, it does look like more. So a higher proportion of the property might be paved, but you still end up with less runoff area in total.
Okay, thank you. And just jumping back to the incentive program, will I qualify for reimbursement if I've already implemented stormwater management practices on my property?
Yep. So for the non-residential properties, yes, any stormwater facilities that were implemented, historically, they certainly would qualify, but you'd still need to provide the documentation of the design and the criteria that they're meeting, and also maintenance certification as well. But yeah, historically, any historic stormwater facilities would certainly qualify.
Okay, thank you, Pippi. I'm not seeing any new themes in the Q&A box. One just popped up. So in relation to climate change costs being applied to areas south of the QEW, that sounds like it was in a presentation from last year. Just scanning the question, it's a little long here. About historical rainfall data not showing an upward trend in rain events. But basically, maybe what's the connection between climate change preparation and maintenance, stormwater maintenance, if I interpreted that correctly. Pippi, do you want to take a run at that?
Yeah. So the town's done some previous studies on that have come up with the cost estimates for their climate adaptation planning. They're not really part of this study. We're really talking about taking those financial, those studies and how to finance them as part of this study. So yeah, I would recommend going and reading those studies and discussing those with the town separately, how each municipality is addressing climate change. Every municipality is different and they're doing their best to address it in the way that possible. Everybody has different assets and have a different set of circumstances. So I don't know if Phoebe or Catherine wants to add anything further to that.
I think one of the key thing is that our our stormwater master plan, which is done south of QEW in the older neighborhoods of the town, back in the days, the stormwater design criterias were lower, such that the rain events that was designed for is lower. So without tying directly to climate change, the newer subdivisions are designed to like the 100-year storm, while the older subdivisions, before a certain age, is always designed to only a 5-year storm. So what we are indicating is that we would like to look at the increase or better stormwater protection in those older areas to become more resilient to climate change. So perhaps it's not about there's more the rain, if according to the question person, that the rain events, the rain hasn't gone down, but we are having more frequent rain, and in the older areas, the stormwater design today did not accommodate, say, the 100-year event or the 25-year event. So a lot of these improvements through these master plans is meant to increase the resiliency and the stormwater protection for the older areas as well.
Okay, thanks for that. And just another comment thread similar to climate change, but how do we prevent creek erosion? Pippi, could you share about that?
Yeah. So yeah, erosion can be caused by a massive storm event where, you get really like I was just out in PEI and they lost 10 meters of shore just through one hurricane event, a few years back. So you can lose the shoreline erosion and creek erosion by large blowouts. Also, if you get a lot of debris in a system, you get blockages, and then that can cause like faster currents in other parts of the system. So debris can also cause erosion. And then also lots of lower storm events, but higher frequency of those events also causes higher erosion as well. So we monitor erosion in the channels by putting pins in the creek, and then fluvial geomorphologists come and survey and measure those pins in the creeks, and we can spot areas that are eroding quickly. The town will also have models of all of their water courses, and we could see where the high shearing stresses are in the models, and tend to visit those more often and more frequently to check on erosion. Yeah, upstream development also can cause further, erosion downstream, especially if there was no stormwater management historically in those areas. So areas that have good stormwater management in their catchment area tend to have less erosion. Yeah, and then along the lake shore, we tend to see the Conservation Authority doing shoreline protection master planning. So that helps us identify areas of specific concern. And they tend to be, in sort of high use areas or at the outlets of the creeks as well. So, yeah, and that they get monitored over time. Then you have you prioritize the deficiencies where you see the erosion. And then you apply a certain amount of budget that's dedicated to stormwater and creek maintenance, usually gets dedicated in any kind of stormwater master planning. And then you look at how much budget you have, and you can only do so much maintenance in your channels each year, and you apply, you sort of prioritize it and hit the worst spots first. And it's kind of the gist of it, I think.
Thanks, Pippi. The only other few questions that have come through all have a similar theme, and Catherine, I know you already responded to it, but maybe you could just reiterate and share a little bit more about how folks can get involved in different decision making around budgets and taxes, and how those decisions are being made.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, the costs for stormwater will come off the property taxes and will be funded entirely through the fee going forward, starting in 2026, if it's approved by council. With regards to the property taxes themselves, they go towards funding a number of different services, not just stormwater. So they fund things like library, fire, recreation services in your community centers, as well as your parks and open spaces, to name a few. So while the stormwater costs will come off the property tax base, there may be demands regarding those other program areas. So that's something that council every year has to balance between all of those different costs and decisions. So our budget process is a public process. Anyone is welcome to come and join and attend those budget meetings, as well as speak with their counselors about their concerns.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Maybe one more question came through. If you could share what other similar municipalities are doing and how that compares with what you've found in this study so far.
Yeah, so right across Canada, we're seeing municipalities move to stormwater funding through a fee, some type of fee. In Ontario, there's somewhere between 10 and 15. And, you know, we've worked with almost all of those municipalities to help them develop their stormwater fee. And I've got to say that as many municipalities there that have stormwater fees, they're all slightly different. But there's a lot of similarities as well. So a variable rate based on runoff area is certainly common. Based on impervious area is also common. We see quite a few with flat fees for residential, just one single flat fee for residential. So it can be all over the place regarding what type of fee they're using. As far as how much they're charging on their fee, it's a bit hard to compare. It's a bit apples and oranges because some municipalities fund all of their stormwater program through the fee. Some of them only fund the maintenance, but not the operational costs. And that type of thing. So it's a bit all over the place, but I would say it's pretty common right across Canada to see stormwater chronically underfunded. And that's really because, like Catherine was saying, there's a lot of competition on the annual budgets for municipalities for other things. And until you get like a catastrophic failure or a massive storm event, we don't seem to get to highlight stormwater as much as possible. So it often goes neglected. So that's why this asset management planning regulation is really a good idea. And I would say that the town of Oakville has done a really good job of recognizing that they were underfunding their system and benchmarking it against other municipalities for the value of infrastructure, that nearly $1 billion value of infrastructure that they're now using a well benchmarked number and that they're aiming for, and they'll have, you know, they're planning well to maintain their system into the future.
Thanks, Pippi. Okay, I don't see any new questions that have come through, so we'll leave it there. And again, just want to say thank you so much for attending. As a reminder, you can visit the study webpage at oakville.ca and search stormwater fee. And if you have any questions or comments following the meeting, please reach out to the study team at stormwaterfee@oakville.ca. Again, we value your input and appreciate the time taken to learn more, and we hope you have a good rest of your evening.